To borrow a phrase from arguably the best quarterback in today's game, last year for the Green Bay Packers was another one of those situations where the team got off to a rough start. I think they were sitting at like 4-6, and it's looking like the season's potentially going to go down the toilet very quickly. But ultimately, RELAX, relax. That cocky son of a bitch took that team and they rode him all the way to a 6-game winning streak to close out the season, a couple of playoff wins, and an NFC Championship game appearance. Aaron Rodgers is a beast, and when all is said and done, we might actually be talking about him as being the greatest quarterback of all time. But unfortunately, no matter how great your quarterback is, if your defense absolutely stinks, eventually you're going to run into trouble, and that's what they did in the NFC Championship game as Atlanta in the Georgia Dome just pounced all over them, destroyed them, brutalized them. And now you get to a situation where you're looking at Aaron Rodgers is closer to the end of his career than the beginning. Mike McCarthy's been there as a head coach for over a decade. Yes, you've been a consistent contending team 4 years. You have a Lombardi trophy from this era, but the clock is ticking. And if you're not going to be able to get it done now, when are you? So I think there is quite a bit of pressure on this Green Bay Packers team to deliver in 2017. So consequently, I wasn't that surprised when a lot of Packer fans were bitching and moaning and complaining about Ted Thompson's lack of desire to spend money in free agency and feeling that this was the time that this team needed to spend. I get it. Because as much as people praise Ted Thompson for the building of his organization through the draft, and I do too, just because almost everybody that starts for you was a draft pick doesn't mean that that's the best possible football team that you can field. That doesn't mean that that's the only way you build a team. Free agency is in place for a reason to supplement your roster at times. And sometimes the lack of willingness to go out in free agency and sign a big name guy has been kind of puzzling to me, because two of the greatest moves this organization ever made was going back before the 93 season and signing Reggie White to, at that time, that monster deal in free agency. And he, along with Brett Favre, changed everything about the Cheeseheads. Because you forget, the 70s and 80s were a bad 2-decade stretch for the Green Bay Packers. But you get Brett Favre in that astoundingly astute deal that Ron Wolf pulled off, fleecing the Atlanta Falcons before the 92 season. And then the next year you bring in Reggie White in free agency, and it changed everything. And then you think about the addition of Charles Woodson, who, was at the end of his run in Oakland. It was kind of looking like he was going to fade off into oblivion, but you go out and you get him, and now he's going to go to the Hall of Fame, and he's a beloved Packer someday. I wouldn't be surprised if he has his damn jersey number retired. Even the Julius Peppers move, you got a couple of okay years out of him. At times, going out and spending in free agency is not the worst thing to do, especially when you are a team that has so much of their team built through the draft. You need those guys sometimes to come and shake things up a little bit and supplement you in key areas on the roster. And Ted Thompson just doesn't have an overwhelming willingness to do that. Now, granted, I understand. Just because you have money to spend and just because there are players you can spend money on doesn't mean you should take that money that you do have and automatically spend it on them. It's got to make sense. It's got to be right. With that said, I did love the signing of Martellus Bennett. This is arguably the best tight end that Aaron Rodgers has ever had to throw the football to, bringing in a veteran like Ajari Evans. Maybe his best football is still behind him, but he's a guy that can play still, I would believe. But especially bringing in a Martellus Bennett, you bring in yet another weapon, yet another matchup problem for opposing defenses. That Packers passing game could be the scariest it's ever been under Aaron. It is absolutely true. Now, heading into the draft, which is what Ted Thompson lives for, you could see the approach was our secondary held us back. Our secondary is not good. Our secondary has massively disappointed. High picks like Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins have not lived up to the expectations. And while we're good at safety with Morgan Burnett and Clinton Dix, the depth behind them, especially letting Micah Hyde go in free agency for what reason, I know not why. You look at it, you really had nothing at corner. And that was the major Achilles heel of this team. And it had to be addressed. So they addressed it with Kevin King from Washington, the 6'3" athlete who hopefully could come in and be that type of presence outside. Then you get another depth guy, get that kind of hybrid safety linebacker type of guy in Josh Jones from North Carolina State. You have a lot of lineups where you're going to run out there with 3 safeties so Josh Jones can defend the run. He can play the pass and do different things. So you can see that the Packers understood that the secondary was the biggest thing that held them back in 2016, and it had to get better. Even though they didn't spend money in free agency, they continued to sink more draft pick resources into that area of the team, and ultimately they've got to hope it works. Now, in terms of this team, what do they still have going for them? Like I said, you got Aaron Rodgers. You've got arguably the best quarterback in the National Football League. While Tom Brady might be the GOAT of all time, in terms of right here, right now, I think Aaron Rodgers is the coolest cat, the best customer there is at the position. Then you look at the receiving talent around him. You've got Jordy Nelson and Devontae Adams, and then Randall Cobb out of the slot. You bring in Martellus Bennett. You've got Ty Montgomery out of the freaking backfield. I mean, this team has pass catchers for days. Those pass catchers, along with the quarterback that you have, are going to create nightmares, absolute nightmares for opposing defenses. Then you look at this team, too. Defensively, I think their front 3 is pretty good, especially with guys like Mike Daniels. But more importantly, overall as a team, it's that chemistry and system familiarity. One thing the Packers have going for them more than any team in the National Football League is because so many of their guys have been in the fold for so long, they know what's expected of them. There's a familiarity there with themselves and their roles in the system, with each other, with their teammates. That chemistry makes a difference. And it's part of the reason why year in, year out, this team is kind of like the New England Patriots light of the NFC. They're in the mix every year. They just don't win as many Lombardi trophies. It's pretty much what it is. But they are consistently in the mix. And they have been, for the most part, running and ruling roughshod over the NFC North for the past several years. But you still have questions about the running game. You know, you're going into the season with a converted wide receiver in Ty Montgomery as your featured running back. How is that going to work out? You know, while you could say there were times where it worked last year, that was when it was something new, it was something fresh, and that was in a more part-time type of role. You know, what's going to happen when Ty Montgomery has to carry the ball 15, 18, 20 times in the game, and teams game plan accordingly? And do you have another option? Is somebody like a Jamal Williams, your 4th-round pick out of BYU, is he going to step up and be a difference maker out of that backfield as a rookie? And then obviously defensively, that secondary, they didn't really invest any money in free agency in this area of the ball, which was a bit surprising. And then you've got Demarius Randall, Quentin Rollins, who have shown you nothing, unfortunately, at Packer fans to indicate that they could be the guys long-term at the corner position. What are you going to get out of Kevin King? What are you going to get out of somebody like Josh Jones? It's striking to me that you have a solid safety tandem in Morgan Burnett and Clinton Dix, and your secondary still overall is trash. It can't stop anybody consistently in the passing game. And you get to the point where if it happens again, how much longer can Dom Capers be your defensive coordinator? And how much longer can you go without investing big money into that area of the team? Is it worth not spending money on that area, knowing that that could potentially be what keeps you from winning another Lombardi trophy or two, which when you have somebody like Aaron Rodgers and the chemistry and continuity of the team that you have, the Packers should have more than one Lombardi trophy, period. In terms of players to watch on this team, offensively, I think it's going to be Ty Montgomery, the former wide receiver from Stanford. Now you've got him in a feature back type of role. How is that going to look? Defensively, I look at the Kevin Kings, Demarius Randalls, Quentin Rollins. It's time for these guys, especially with Rollins and Randall, to put up or shut up. And you have to hope that Kevin King can come in as a rookie and not play like a rookie. In terms of the schedule for the Packers, I look at some of the key matchups, like Week 1, they host Seattle. You know, that could have playoff implications. Week 2, they go to Atlanta. So they're going back to the scene of the crime in the NFC Championship game when they got absolutely butt-raped by Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Freeman, Coleman, and the rest of the Atlanta Falcons. This is a revenge game for the Packers, and they need to show early on that last year was last year and this is now. Week 5, they go to Dallas, and again, that's another game that could potentially have major playoff implications. Going back again to the scene of the crime, in this case, the Packers pulling out that late victory against the Dallas Cowboys in that exciting-ass divisional round game. And then week 12, they go to Pittsburgh, which for all intents and purposes could potentially be a Super Bowl preview. You've got Big Ben versus Aaron Rodgers, two quality teams, two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and you never know. This could potentially be the last time these two guys are on the same football field together. So we might as well enjoy it while we can. Ultimately, I still think when all is said and done, the Packers are clearly the class of the NFC North. They have been for years, and I think that streak continues in 2017. I think they're at least 11-win football team. They're going to win this division by a couple of games, and they might be battling it out for a 2 seed in the NFC. They might be in the mix for home field advantage throughout the playoffs. It's just a matter of when you get to that point in time where it's going to matter, can the Packers get enough of a running game for Ty Montgomery and others to balance out the offense and control the clock? And then defensively, can their secondary stop anybody? If the answer to both of those questions is yes, they can, then you're looking at a team